You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions, as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Welcome to another awesome episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. In today's episode, we are interviewing Steve Wright of scdlifestyle.com. Steve is a health practitioner. He's also known as a poop specialist in our space, as he struggled with severe IBS and digestive problems, now helps other people fix their gut. So how's it going today, Steve?
Great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. How's it going today, Dr. Justin?
It's going great, Barris. I'm really excited for today's podcast.
Yeah, definitely. So, Steve, I gave a little quick introduction, but for the people out there who don't know about you, could you give us a little bit of background about your story? I know one thing that I like, we actually just did an interview with Garrett, and he had a different, like, an engineering background, and you also did some electrical engineering in the past. Could you tell me about your background and how you got led into this health space?
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually what I tend to call myself, is a digestive engineer or health engineer. Mm-hmm. I have for the past 2 years worked with people one-on-one, but I've recently stopped doing that. So I guess I'm no longer officially any sort of practitioner. But yeah, it's sort of everybody's story on how you end up in this space. I had an issue, and no one in the modern medicine system was giving me any relief at all, not even a small amount. And so my background from college is electrical engineering, and I think what engineering college does teach you is it teaches you to be okay with really complex problems and problems that have unknown parts of them. And so once I really realized that food was a big key to my digestive issues, I had really, really bad IBS with gas and bloating that was like so bad it would make me want to cry. But then when I farted, it would feel so good, but it would smell so bad. It was like those really bad farts that nobody wants to claim, like you're afraid something died in you. So it was, a very diabolical problem every time I had to eat. But I had all kinds of other symptoms. That was just my big pain point. I had cystic acne. I was 30 pounds overweight. Used to be 60 pounds overweight. All these different issues. And one of my good friends, Jordan, my business partner now, he was celiac and was getting no help from gluten-free. And a practitioner put him on a specific carbohydrate diet, and he started getting better. And so in a moment of fury and just tears and upsetness, I called him one day, and he convinced me to give it a shot. And 3 days into changing my diet, my gas and bloating was gone. And so at that point was when I felt empowered and suddenly had started to take a little bit of responsibility for my own health and not outsource it to everything. And so between kind of being angry and really sick, that kind of led me to sort of own my training and as far as problem solving goes and take responsibility. And so it's been a 5 to 6 year process now of, okay, well, that feels better, but how much more energy could I have? How much, can I have clear skin? Could I go from a very strict diet that worked really well to a diverse diet that's like 80-20? Can I do a sprint triathlon? Can I, go backpacking for multiple days up in the Rocky Mountains? And just kind of every layer of sort of getting my health back to levels I never thought existed. And then each time I find something that works, I try to turn around and educate the public about it or create some sort of program to allow people to do it cheaper, better, faster.
Definitely. That sounds good. That's a good overall view of what happens. And I like the fact that now, you had to go on a strict diet because of how much healing you needed in the past, but also where now you probably could be a little bit more lenient and not so strict on your diet. Do you still have to be pretty precise? Do you notice like a definite change when you eat like maybe the wrong foods, or is your body a little bit more, should I say, resilient to that now?
I definitely have a much more resilient health perspective at this point, or health level at this point. I can eat gluten for like a meal or two. Anything more than that, my skin will like instantly begin to break out, and I'll immediately feel some fogginess in my brain sometimes as well. So I still have sensitivities to some types of foods. And in general, I eat, all whole foods. Typically, if I do go out, I'm going out to the best restaurants, eating very much like a paleo with some Weston A. Price sort of mixed in. So, I will eat legumes like once a week, properly prepared. Obviously, I'll eat high quality dairy from time to time. But in general, 85 to 90% of my template diet is meats, fruits, vegetables, healthy fats, that type of thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Steve, this is Justin here. A couple questions for you on the SCD diet. I use that diet with my patients quite frequently, especially ones that have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, etc. And I'll also use the GAPS diet or the intro phase diet for GAPS. And I'm just curious, how do you, when you were working with patients, how would you apply the SCD versus GAPS, and when would you choose one over the other?
Great question. So essentially what we use at SC Lifestyle and what I would use with people is basically the best of both worlds. So in my opinion, the specific carbohydrate diet, as it was written by Dr. Sydney Haas, or as it was written by Elaine Gottschall in her very popular book, Breaking the Vicious Cycle, is incomplete. And the work that Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride has done with the GAPS diet, again, all of these people are amazing and they've helped save my life. So this is not a sort of a walking on them. It's much more of we need to continue to further the ability to help people. And so both diets by themselves in silos have disadvantages, and they don't seem to produce consistent results for the majority of people who try them. They seem to maybe only serve 60% or 70, something like that.
Steve, real quick, just because I think that some listeners might not know kind of the overall, what is, before you kind of go into what you do with clients, could you go a quick brief overview of what the SCD lifestyle or the SCD diet kind of consists of, and also what the general basis of a GAPS diet is? Sure.
Yeah. So that's a great point. We should probably define what we're talking about here. So great point, Barris. So the specific carbohydrate diet started in the literature in the 1920s. Essentially, the diet as it was written through those various evolutions I just mentioned is a diet that's processed food free, additive free, grain free, and polysaccharide or disaccharide free. Even though that's a little bit of a debate right now if you get into the minutia. But essentially what is allowed on the specific carbohydrate diet are properly prepared legumes, some fermented dairy such as cheese or homemade yogurts, meats, fruits, vegetables, nuts, all of those types of things. And there are specific, for instance, Elaine Gottschall chose to not include seaweed and multiple other specific parts of foods that have polysaccharides. And the basis for that is just that when your gut's really messed up, you can't break down those carbohydrate chains and actually absorb them, and they end up feeding bacteria or feeding the gut dysbiosis that might already be going on. So Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride saw the gold in SCD and took that and made it as the underlying foundation of GAPS. And what she did was she essentially innovated on top of it to really help her autistic son. And so she removed dairy from it. And, because a lot of people do have dairy allergies and totally understand that. She also added in juicing. She added in like some specific probiotic recommendations. She did come up with like a lengthy intro diet, whereas SCD had a sort of an initial phase diet, like 3 to 5 days, whereas the GAPS intro phase can be much longer. And so, both of them have a lot of merit, and they've helped a lot of people. And I think Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride totally hit on something that we also abide by at SC Lifestyle, which is that dairy is very reactive. And we personally tell everyone no dairy for 30 days, always be testing it. And then if you do happen to be okay with dairy, I think it's a really powerful food group that you shouldn't completely exclude. And so that's one of my sort of beasts with the GAPS diet. And so as far as like, how do we use either one? It's a great question. So essentially it comes down to, I think, creating your own custom diet, and these both diets could get you there. My beef with GAPS really is that the juicing can be overtaxing. Like, you're already learning how to cook and how to shop again, how to clean up. And so if you want to add on top of that another layer of juicing, those are more skills and more money, where the bang for the buck only seems to be there for a certain set of people who have really bad detoxification issues. And for other people who have like SIBO or other, that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or other really bad gut dysbiosis, the actual juicing can really affect them. And if you have someone who switches diets in the first week or two and all they do is feel worse, they're not going to stick with it. And so once again, I'm not against juicing. I just think it's something that you add later as you begin to jump into this lifestyle. So basically my overall thing is start with meats, fruits, vegetables, cook everything. And, we have like phasing charts over at selifestyle.com, but kind of staying away from actually the cruciferous family at the beginning, because those can be hard to break down because there's a little bit more complex molecules and fibers in those, and really just starting from a cooking standpoint, and very much sort of, the GAPS intro can be like no fruits and vegetables. And I think that works for some people, but in general, from a satiety standpoint and from a ability to stick to a diet, I think there needs to be some sort of compromise there. And so that's kind of what we try to do at SE Lifestyle, is like, we saw these people failing in multiple ways, and we're like, okay, let's just take the best practices and sort of begin to coach people through that.
Awesome. Those are some great points there, Steve. So looking at the SCD and looking at GAPS, one thing I notice on the GAPS side is a big emphasis in bone broths. I don't quite see that on the SCD side. So I just wanted to kind of figure out how you apply and how you use bone broths. And just one layer on top of that is I kind of want you to go into FODMAPs, because I know even in the GAPS intro, they still, talk about adding in broccoli and cauliflower and even onions at some points. And I see in the intro diet, they even mention apple cider and things like that in 1 and 2, and then avocado, I think, in phase 2 or 3. So I wanted to get your take, just to rehash that, on when you apply broths, and do you ever take FODMAPs 100% out of the equation? And you probably even want to go into what FODMAPs are too.
Yeah, that's lots of stuff to unpack there, but great questions, Justin. So let's start with the bone broth. Bone broth can be like this amazing healing food, and I do think it should be very much a part of a healthy person's, or a person who can digest it, very much a part of their life. Hopefully you're having it on a weekly basis, if not a more often basis than that. Some people love it every day. And I think it's a great food for that. So I love the fact that the GAPS diet really elevates bone broth and talked about it a lot, because it does seem to be like a needle mover for a lot of people. And so I think we have to always keep our eye on the different needle movers, because something like maybe supplement X, it's really good for your health, but it's maybe not going to like really cause massive change in a month or something like that. Whereas bone broth could have the potential to do that. So my thoughts on it are we typically add it in a little bit later, after the first 30 days or so, and always looking out for fat malabsorption. Because there are a lot of IBD people, for instance, or people who are still misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, who have just a really wrecked gut. And bone broth for them is like death soup, like drinking it just, makes them want to cry. So I think it's worthwhile to let people know, like, if you can't already tolerate a lot of fatty foods or anything like that, or you have like some really bad gut dysbiosis, sometimes it's better to wait, 4 to 8 weeks before you begin to slowly introduce bone broth. And the same thing could be said for probiotic foods. GAPS is really, really big on probiotic foods, and I love that as well. But again, there's the really, really sick people who need to have a gradual introduction into all of these things. Like, for instance, my business partner, Jordan, he had to start with 1 strain of sauerkraut per day for like months. It took him like 2 or 3 months to get up to like 2 or 3 spoonfuls or forkfuls of it. And so look, that's where I guess sort of I think that first 30 days is really key for just keeping it really simple and trying to keep the diversity a little high with fruits and vegetables, but also, as you mentioned, watching out for FODMAPs. So FODMAPs, is this fascinating diet out of Australia, and I think it's a really cool new take on foods and how they impact us and how the gut flora is impacted from them. In general, I think at a 30,000 foot view, my experience with FODMAPs is that the more intolerant you are to FODMAPs foods, the more damage and the more destroyed your gut is. And so removing them, if you are intolerant to them in the beginning, can be sort of like a life changer. Like your quality of life can immediately go way up. However, I don't think they're a class of foods you want to keep out forever. Like you mentioned, onions and broccoli and cauliflower, like these are very powerful, great foods that we should use later on in a very healthy diet. But I think that sometimes for those people, they just have to heal their gut a little bit longer before they can reintroduce those.
Excellent points.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's basically a certain level of making sure that you're healthy enough, or you take like a more therapeutic approach to where maybe you have to kind of babysit and be kind of delicate on what foods you introduce until that gut's kind of cleaned up, and now you can actually take some of the nutrients out of these other foods that might be harder to digest.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. The diet that you should be following is like, for me, it's the Steve diet, it's the Barris diet, it's the Justin diet, and your gut flora, my gut flora, our epigenetics, all these things are different. And they're also different depending on where you are with your health and your life. So in the beginning, you might have to get a very restricted diet, but don't label foods as good or bad. Just label them as good for me or good for me right now or not good for me right now. And based on whether you can digest them or not digest them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That sounds good. So you were just talking about how some people have a problem digesting fats. And it's funny because we also talked about how people could have problems with breaking down the carbohydrates. And oftentimes when people are backed up and have constipation, I know a lot of people, they like to bulk up with like psyllium husk or just pack a bunch of fiber in order to get things moving along. But I like how you have a little bit of a different perspective. Could you, for the listeners out there who might have some constipation issues and they're just trying to stack up on psyllium husk, could you give them some other advice on how they can maybe help with the constipation issues?
Yeah, so I guess my counter perspective is that fiber from whole foods is really the kind of fiber you want. And supplementing with psyllium husk is basically you're going to try to do the same thing. If this analogy makes sense for you, this is what you would be doing with psyllium husk. So let's say that, since we're talking about poop, you take a big dump and you plug your toilet and you go to flush and nothing happens. Would you pull out more toilet paper and start to shove it in the toilet to make that?
No, it'd make everything worse.
Right. So that's sort of the same thing with psyllium husk is, it's sort of like a plugged toilet in a way. Would you dump a bunch more poop basically into your system, hoping that it's just going to unclog it? Some people it works in the short run. Myself, and how most people actually experience it is that it's either going to make a bunch of bloating and really hurt, or it might work for a week or so, and then all of a sudden you notice that you need more and more and more. And through this process, you might actually be damaging your colon just because you're creating so much feces. So my take on that is it's not a amount of poop problem that constipated people have. It's the inability to get rid of it. So there's an evacuation problem going on, not a lack of poop to get rid of. Mm-hmm. And so, there's lots of ways that we could do this without using psyllium husk and some of the herbal laxatives and enemas and things like that. And that's through substances that either help with peristalsis, which are the waves that actually move the food through your stomach and then obviously get rid of your stool. And then there's also substances like vitamin C and magnesium, which are nutrients that your body could absorb and could help you in that regard. But when you overdose on them or begin to sort of micro overdose on them, they'll actually draw some water into the digestive tract and sort of begin to help move things along or soften the stool and kind of get it along. So I really prefer those sort of short-term interventions with vitamin C and magnesium, and typically magnesium glycinate or citrate. And then long-term thinking about why, what's going on here? Why isn't the peristalsis happening? Do you need more probiotics or more fiber from whole foods? And beginning to try to get to the root cause of why you're constipated in the first point.
Excellent points. Great points, Steve. Now, I work with a lot of patients, and I find gut infections are strongly at play. Lots of different parasite issues, whether bacterial issues, H. pylori, chronic fungal overgrowth, SIBO. And a lot of these infections, they produce toxins, right? So we know endotoxin or lipopolysaccharides. These are produced from a lot of the gram-negative bacteria, and these can disrupt a lot of those peristaltic waves, or kind of like if you were to get the last bit of your toothpaste out in your toothpaste, you roll it up. That's kind of how your intestine works. So can you talk about how, kind of in your role working with patients, being a clinician, how these infections really kind of muck things up, if you will?
So, just to clarify, I don't have a medical license or anything, so I was just a health coach. But the clients that I worked with, GI infections are extremely prevalent, and people are not getting this message. They're not hearing this message. If you sort of poll the community, and I'm sure what percentage you saw, Justin, but like Dr. Tom O'Brien sees 70 to 80% of every person who walks into his clinic, whether they're complaining about GI issues or not, have a gut infection. I've heard Dr. Lauren Noel talk about around 80% as well.
Agree.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Totally agree.
And that's pretty much what we saw too, is 80 to 90%, for the people that we are working with. So it's a really high percentage. And so, exactly. Those infections do a lot of damage. Number one, they could shut down the peristalsis waves. Number two, all those toxins are definitely going to be causing inflammation and probably leading to leaky gut. It's really the root cause, especially constipation. Like constipation to me is like a huge, massive red flag that there's probably some sort of infection that you want to go and get tested for.
Yeah, that's great. And I also have a site called fixyourthyroid.com, and I talk a lot about thyroid issues. And I see on your blog here today, you did a blog on, is your thyroid destroying your gut function? Could you touch base on the thyroid-gut connection, Steve?
Yeah, sure. So that's, so I'm sure you've mentioned this before, but every cell in your body needs thyroid hormone. They need, at least T3 to function. And so the thyroid is extremely important. And if you look in the research, there's a high prevalence of thyroid disorders and inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, and thyroid disorders are very high. So it's kind of fascinating to think that these two, there's a gut issue that's diagnosed, and then typically, or at least you have a much more increased risk of ending up with some sort of thyroid autoimmune disease as well. And I think a lot of what's going on here is you have a couple of things. Number one is that if you're not, if there's not enough thyroid hormone ending up in your gut cells, the peristalsis wave, this is shown in research, the peristalsis waves will be either slowed down, or the strength of them, their ability to sort of squeeze out, like you're talking about with the toothpaste, will be diminished as well. And that's just because the cells are not getting enough of the hormone signal to do the job that they're supposed to do. Now, if you're hyperthyroid instead of hypothyroid, then you could be causing like diarrhea or something like that. And the really cool research that's coming out that I'm really pumped about, and I'll be writing more about in the coming weeks, is that they're now showing that maybe up to 20%. I mean, this is really new stuff, but all we really know is that the gut flora plays a big role in the conversion from T4 to T3. And so I know this isn't perfect science, but I think it's easiest to remember T4 is sort of the inactive form of thyroid hormone, more of the storage part of the thyroid hormone. Right. And T3 is the one that everybody wants majority of the time. And so the gut flora help with not only the conversion of T4 to T3, but they also store some of the T3. And so if you have a disrupted gut flora, you might have poor conversion. And then that's going to feed a signal back to begin to make more thyroid hormone. And it can continue these bad feedback loops and really begin to cause a bunch of issues. And conversely, maybe you're eating an SCD diet or a GAPS diet. You've gotten rid of a gut infection, but you're still having to rely on magnesium or vitamin C to have bowel movements when it could be just that you needed some sort of thyroid support or some work up there to actually begin to restore full function to the gut. Does that make sense? I don't know if I was kind of talking all around that article.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. And I mean, like a simple way to think about it, and it's so awesome how complex yet amazing our bodies are. When you see something like hypothyroidism and then slowing down the intestines, and we know our thyroid is like our master metabolism kind of gland, and then we see like, oh, well, if you have a hyperthyroid, you might have diarrhea, and it's kind of your body telling you like things are hypermobile, it's speeding up, there's something going wrong. Or if the inverse is happening, it's your body and it's kind of obviously telling you something, and oftentimes it's just so common that we kind of ignore those signals.
I mean, I think that's part of every system in the body, like functional medicine, like everything's connected to everything. And so, it could be that the gut is potentially messing up the adrenal, the HPA axis or the thyroid just itself. And it can be the other way. And so I think what you said there is perfect, is really a lot of this is about becoming aware of our bodies again. And I know one of the reasons, or one of the ways in which I got sick was essentially, and it's no fault of anybody's, but it's not like humans, we get like a manual that says, this is how you should relate to your body, and this is what a perfect poop is, and this is what a perfect thyroid is. Like, we don't get that. And typically the process of getting that is through getting back into our bodies and realizing what we're putting in, what we're consuming, and then talking to other people who have very robust, resilient health. How do they feel? Like, what do they do? And if you can't do what they do, then you're like, oh, interesting. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to slightly transition. I was actually on a call, and we had like somebody call in, and they were talking about their a client going to their doctor after they just did these gut panels, and it's funny because we talked about like the infections and parasites, and usually people think like, unless you're swimming in some dirty water in Thailand, like we don't get parasites or infections or things like that in America. But they had leaky gut, and they went to their doctors, and the doctor said, well, it's not real, right? That's not a real thing. I'm not going to treat anything like that. Could you answer this question for us? I mean, I know we kind of know this, but is leaky gut real, and how have you seen that in your practice?
Yeah, this is such a profoundly simple question. What's real is what's real to us individually. So in that doctor's point of view, leaky gut's not real to him. I don't know what his basis of medicine is or how he functions in this world. I'm not here to judge him, but let's say, for instance, you just went to PubMed, which is, if people don't know, that's a big search engine for all the research that's going on in the medical community. If you type in intestinal permeability, which is the medical term for leaky gut's kind of like the slang term, you'll find well over 10,000 research papers that reference it. So I don't know, maybe things become real for that doctor at 100,000 references or 12,000. I'm not sure. But what's true is that since the 1980s, papers have been being published since we realized that how the gut actually begins to function is through cells that become more permeable depending on the conditions that are present in the body and outside of the body. And so this is a known fact now, that there's a such thing as a permeable gut, and that's actually how the gut cells function. The problem is that this is just beginning to be taught in medical schools. And as most people know, your average family practitioner and even most gastroenterologists and people like this, they got to school a long time ago. And to be honest, they're not interested in learning new ideas. They're just interested in going to a yearly conference or two and brushing up on the paradigm that they bought and paid for and worked really hard to get. So I think at this point, the patients out there have to decide whether or not they believe it's real. If they believe it's real, then it's time to fire your doctor and find someone who believes the same thing you believe. I mean, if you believe that you should pay your taxes, but your accountant said don't pay your taxes, you would probably fire that accountant and go with the one that believed what you believed. So the same thing applies to medicine. Doctors are there to serve you, and that's not how it's always been portrayed, but that's really how the world works. When you buy a consultant, they're there to help you. So if your consultant's not acting in a way that you wish they would, it's time to fire them.
Awesome points. Yeah. And Steve, just so you know, 10,842 for intestinal permeability on PubMed right now as we speak.
That's so awesome. It's creeping up. I'm going to get to 11,000 here soon.
I know, right? So you kind of touching back on the doctor's paradigm and being a physician myself and working with lots of patients, you come to the resolution that what you're learning in school and what you're learning in your textbooks is about 20 to 30 years old. So to be on top of things and to really help your patients, you have to be studying what's clinically working now, talking to other doctors, going to cutting edge conferences where you're learning the application of what's happening now. What are the best tests? What are the best things we can use supplementally, diet-wise, lifestyle-wise to fix these things? And also we have to step outside the insurance model because a 5-minute doctor's visit isn't going to be enough to get the information to teach our patients. So can you talk about kind of the functional medicine model versus the insurance model?
Yeah, sure. So I love analogies, right? So I think this is how the insurance model works. It's much like the public school system. So if people can think about the public school system, they've probably thought about that more than the insurance model. But the teacher and the doctor are the same role. So in the public service or the public school model, the teacher is told exactly what they must teach. They have exams that their students are measured on, and if they don't get their students to that certain grade, then they could be fired. They get specific kinds of pencils. They get specific textbooks, regardless of what they want to teach. They're told how they have to teach and what exactly the takeaways are. Well, that's the exact same thing that's happening in the medicine world. So I really don't fault doctors. I do think that obviously, like yourself, Justin, like you decided that you're going to do something different, and you've decided to take more responsibility, more investment into your profession. And there are teachers, there's standout teachers who do the exact same thing. They buy their own markers, they buy their own stuff. But that takes a really special person. And so if you want to subsist inside either system, you have to realize the standard of care that's practiced there. And so in the insurance model, the insurance companies dictate exactly how those doctors have to function. And if they don't follow what the insurance company said was step one, it can go so far as the medical review board could remove their license. Wow. And so their license is what they've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in 8 to 10 years of their life to get. So they're stuck in a really rock and a hard place position here. And so that's where you almost have to step outside of the system and go over to this non-insurance based model where a lot of the functional medicine practitioners practice. And I think there's another distinction there that we should make, which is that I think the insurance model is really built around care, and it's about solving the immediate pain, but no time is spent on why are you in pain or how did you get here. Whereas in the functional medicine model, which is typically outside of this insurance model, so that physicians like yourself can actually spend 30 minutes, an hour, more time than that. You actually have time in your day probably to research the tough cases and figure out the newest and best models, or reach out to world-class practitioners who are doing something different that no one's heard of yet to help these people. And that model is really about why is this happening in your body? Because you might have acne and depression and a little bit of constipation, and your knee might hurt a little bit. But in the insurance-based model, you're probably going to have a physician for each one of those things. You're going to have a dermatologist, you're going to have a neurologist, you're going to have a gastroenterologist, and you'll probably have some sort of orthopedic surgeon or something on your team. And none of these people talk to each other. And then in the functional medicine model, you could go see someone and they'd be like, oh, actually, all that stuff's related back to, it looks like your gut and your hormones are off. Mm-hmm. And so if we fix both of those, all of that stuff will go away. Mm. And so I think that's also a big distinction between the two models. Is one model's silo and specialty focused, and the other model is like, wait, everything's related. It's all the system. And so if I tweak something over here, it's going to affect something else over here.
Absolutely. And I know I'm constantly learning, and I found the SED lifestyle phasing chart through you guys, through your site, and I've been using that with my patients for the last year, and that's really worked wonders. So I appreciate that, that contribution you made.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, really, and this is probably both of you guys' kind of thoughts. I just want to create the stuff, I'm in this for myself as well as for everybody else, but I really want to create tools and blog posts that I wish I would have had 7 years ago. Because it's inexcusable that more people don't know about this stuff. So that's like a rule that I have about what products and what things we put on the market, what blog posts we publish, is if this wouldn't serve me 7 years ago, like, we're not going to do it.
Love it. I love it. And right now, there are lots of people out there that are trying to get answers, right? They're trying the diet stuff, and they're also curious about functional medicine lab testing. So I know there's a lot of ways that you can spend a lot of money on lab testing and maybe not accomplish a whole bunch. So there's certain tests out there that may not get you the underlying cause of what's driving things. So what would you think key foundational lab tests that you would recommend? And again, there are exceptions to every rule. Like, a lot of times people think food allergy testing is a waste, but some people it may be beneficial. What tests do you think are key and foundational to addressing maybe chronic gut and or fatigue issues?
Yeah, that's great. And you're right. There's outliers on everything we talk about in the world. There's an outlier. So from my point of view, again, kind of like if you take sort of my engineering mindset of how do we get the most bang for our buck and what are the biggest needle movers regarding diet, and we can apply this for tests too. And so when it comes to tests, I think the first thing is getting a good handle on a salivary adrenal panel, like adrenal stress index is what they're called, for your hormones, because we talked about thyroid earlier in this podcast, but what a lot of people are just learning or don't know about yet is that as long as you don't have an autoimmune condition with the thyroid, a lot of it could be handled just through fixing your adrenal glands. And then a lot of sort of other sex hormone issues can be taken care of if you really get those guys working properly and the feedback loops working properly. So I think number one, working with a physician who can screen you for autoimmune markers, that is a really needle mover test. And some people do that through like Cyrex Labs. Other people can do that through blood testing. I think those are really big needle mover tests, because if you find that, that's huge in this whole grand scheme of things and what you're going to eat and what you should go after. I think the salivary index, BioHealth is the trusted lab that I like. I've tried a lot of labs out there and I've run panels. Do you agree?
I 100% agree.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I've run panels, and I'm not going to name any other labs, but almost every other big lab you've ever heard of, I've run side-by-side panels, and BioHealth always seems to line up with symptomology for people. And so that's who I trust for the salivary hormone stuff. And then the next big thing is a GI infections test or two. So here's a fascinating nugget that's not only fascinating, but extremely frustrating. We did over 400 case studies where we had people doing a BioHealth 401H, which is a stool test for infections, versus other labs' stool tests. And so we just essentially said, this is the model in which we do. If you want to work with us, because of what we've seen, you have to do these two tests. And that means basically double the money. And we found somewhere around 70% of the time, roughly, give or take 10%, they were off. In other words, one test caught some bugs that made sense and the BioHealth didn't, or the BioHealth caught them and the other test didn't. And so that's really frustrating, but it's a very interesting point, which is that you want a practitioner who not only uses sort of the same base testing, but also sees a lot of these tests, because tests are not perfect. There's nothing about any medical test out there that's perfect. Even cholesterol testing is very imperfect. And so you need a practitioner who understands the subtleties and the limitations of testing. So when it comes down to needle mover tests, I would definitely go with, a BioHealth saliva panel, at least a 401H from BioHealth, and then, combine that with maybe another one out there, Genova or Dr. Dad or somebody like that, another trusted lab. And then however your doctor prefers to screen for autoimmunity.
Awesome. So I know you mentioned the false negatives with the kind of the GI testing. are you going to, I know you might not treat in a specific way if you don't find anything, but are you still going to kind of go about it the same way if somebody's having a lot of symptoms of an infection and you're not finding anything? Or you still might do some kind of protocol that's still geared that way just in case it was just a false negative?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely, talked with people about that in the past, me. And I know a lot of other high, really respected functional medicine practitioners do the same thing. The issue with that is that you don't know, you have to then use sort of like a broad protocol. You can't target a specific type of bug. For instance, if it was H. pylori versus SIBO, those are two different programs, or, Indolamax NANA or eHisto or something. Every one of those people or every one of those infections has a specific protocol that works really well for it. If you get a false negative, but you still think that there's an infection there, I think it's still worthwhile at that point to use some sort of broad spectrum based protocol and then follow up with testing again. So just because you had one false negative, here's a crazy story for you guys. So I've had low stomach acid since I started this whole journey. It was one of the first things that I figured out that nobody was talking about. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I take betaine HCl, like I start to have this amazing poops, and I don't burp anymore, and I don't have indigestion anymore. It was this amazing thing. And so ever since then, that was like 7 years ago, I'm like Googling and trying to figure out like what causes stomach acid to be low, to be suppressed. And, there's lots of different things, but the main one out there typically is H. pylori. And so for years, I'm like, I have H. pylori. I know I have it. But I have like 2.5 years worth of tests that are negative, no H. pylori. And so we never treated it because there was never anything there. And we're talking all kinds of different labs, all kinds of different ways of testing. But as I got healthier and healthier, I did another stool test, and then eventually I did get a positive for H. pylori. And treated it, and now I don't need any sort of stomach acid boosting support unless I'm under a really bad stressful situation. And so the moral of the story here is, number one, tests in and of themselves just done once are almost worthless. You need to continue to do testing over time. And there's conditions such as crypt hyperplasia, which may have been happening in my case, or there's maybe this idea in my head, this theory that as you begin to solve root problems, as I began to increase my immune system through fixing hormone dysregulation, all of a sudden that infection became active enough to actually find it on a test. And so I really think it's a fallacy to think that you can test once and figure this all out.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I recommend lab testing just for preventative medicine maintenance, just once a year, at least a gut test, even if you're healthy. I know when I met my fiance, for instance, she had 15 years of IBS issues, going to the ER, being scoped many times. And when I first treated her, she had a blastocystis hominis infection. We removed that infection, half the pain gone. Then we tested again, H. pylori. Then it was cryptosporidium. Then it was a worm infection. Then it was Giardia. She had 7 or 8 infections layered in the crypt. So if all of our listeners can just open the palm of their hand, think of the fingers as like the villi, and then where the finger gaps meet the palm of the hand, that's like where the crypts are, and these infections get burrowed up in there. So based on your experience, Steve, what do you think the most common and most virulent strong infections that you see out there are?
Well, I just want to echo exactly the advice you just gave, Justin. I do the exact same thing. I actually just ordered $2,500 worth of preventative testing.
Nice.
And I do it every year. And that's part of my budget. That's part of how I look at healthcare and taking responsibility for my health these days is I have a catastrophic health insurance policy, but then I also have, I have that deductible covered in savings. But every year I budget $2,000 to $3,000 worth of preventative testing just to make sure I'm on the right track. Because if I can catch this stuff, I'll never even use that deductible unless I, have some sort of acute problem that happens through sports or accidents or something like that.
Love it.
So I can't echo that enough.
Love it.
So back to common infections. Yeah. So, I would say like out of the 600 or so case examples I can pull from, blastocystis hominis is a huge one. Let's see what else. H. pylori was another really, really common one. Entamoeba coli is another really common. I would say those three are probably the most common that I saw on a regular basis, along with SIBO. Excuse me, I should definitely throw small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in there because that is super common.
Yeah, yeah. And then when you're looking at patients, because I have the same thing where sometimes the lab work doesn't come up positive, and you're like, what are you going to do? What are the clinical markers and signs that you may look to say, well, there's still something wrong? Maybe they cut out FODMAPs and they have an improvement. What other clinical markers would you look at outside of just lab testing?
Yeah, I would look at, number one, any gas or bloating at all is indication to me that there's likely low stomach acid plus some sort of overgrowth. That to me, those are really big red flags for either or both conditions because they sort of feed each other. And the other, I would guess, like, okay, so if you're using supplements that physically alter the way in which the intestines work, that would be things like digestive enzymes, beta-NaCl, ox bile, vitamin C, magnesium if you want. So like the first three are more about like stopping diarrhea or helping constipation, and magnesium, vitamin C, laxatives, things that improve constipation. If you're not having perfect poops on a really healthy diet, like a whole foods diet, like any of the diets we've talked about so far, you're still having loose stools or constipated stools, like that's all we really need right there. The other thing is if there's any autoimmune markers at all, I'm automatically thinking GI infection. And yeah, I would say, any autoimmunity, any sort of GI distress at all. And then lastly, like really, if things just seem complex, like you've been sick for a really long time, then typically I'm assuming you have multiple areas of your body that have been downregulated over time. And part of that's just going to be the gut. So maybe it wasn't always the gut. Maybe it started with some thyroid and adrenal stress, and then you lost your immunity, and then you just picked up a gut infection. So now you're presenting as chronic fatigue or multiple chemical sensitivity or fibromyalgia. And for instance, fibromyalgia, there's 70%, some studies that show 70% of people with fibromyalgia have SIBO. So any of these sort of complex syndromes and undiagnosed problems like IBS, immediately I'm thinking, this person is a high chance of having a gut infection of some type.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And real briefly, I know we're coming closer to the end of our episode, but if you can go over, because I know SIBO is a really big issue that's starting to pop up a lot more now. For those of our listeners who aren't too familiar with it, I know, Dr. Justin, you recently did a video on SIBO. Could you go into a little bit more into SIBO and just talk about how you might get this overgrowth and kind of like what's a little bit of behind the mechanisms and maybe some ideas of how to get rid of it as well?
Yeah, sure. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is essentially you're having too much bacteria in the small intestine. It could be beneficial strains of bacteria. It could be just neutral bacteria or even bad bacteria that are overgrowing. But essentially what's happened is most of your bacterial growth should be in the large intestine, not in the small. And somehow you now have a colony in the small intestine that is essentially, producing a lot of gas. They're just being bacteria. Bacteria are very, very simple. I mean, they eat and they give off a byproduct. But the symptoms that it causes are very intense and can be very debilitating depending on the level of overgrowth and the length of time. The ways in which you get it are almost too numerous for us to even go into on this show. It's a wonder that your average sick person in America hasn't gotten it. A lot of people do have it, but essentially once you combine stress with one bout of gastroenteritis or, just like food poisoning or something like that, your chances of having SIBO go through the roof. And some of the new research is starting to talk about the fact of just one round of gastroenteritis, something like that. Every time you have one of those, your chances of SIBO are through the roof. But there's lots of other things you can have. valve malfunctions in your intestines. Low stomach acid really feeds into it. Essentially, how you're going to beat it is that those bacteria need a food source. So it's just like if you dropped a spoonful of peanut butter on a sidewalk, the ants and the animals are going to come running. And so that's essentially what's happening in the small intestine. There is a food source, and biology is just taking over. Like there's going to be a something that's going to step up and fill that role in the community. And so reducing the food source through diets like the specific carbohydrate diet, through the GAPS diet, is one way to begin to lower the community. But a lot of people will need either a antibiotic protocol with typically rifaximin, maybe some other add-ons, or a herbal protocol to really get rid of it. And from my personal opinion, and it's I guess one of the leaders behind the specific carbohydrate diet at this point in time, I do not believe that you can starve out SIBO. I've been working on it with myself and working with people for over 6 years now. And this idea that you can starve out a SIBO thing or a Candida thing infection, I think that's just a giant myth.
I totally agree with that. I see that all the time with my patients where we have to use a combination of herbal medicines, whether it's higher dose oil of oregano or berberines and golden seal or higher dose artemisia. I 100% in agreement with that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I would just say if people are listening to this, they're like, man, I did that too, and it came back. The first thing I'm thinking is your immune system suppressed, and it's probably your hormones. So I think a lot of the reoccurrent Candida people out there, the reoccurrent SIBO people out there, if your functional medicine practitioner hasn't been focused in on your hormones and your immune system, I think that's why a lot of the reinfections or the colony just overgrows again.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I like the analogy you made earlier with the, you drop something on the floor, all the bugs and the ants are going to eat it. It's kind of like if your body's not able to break down what you have, something else will. And then so, yeah, and it's hard to say like, oh, we'll starve it out. Well, they're still there. You still have to find a way to get rid of them. So definitely I've looking at research, I've seen the same thing. So yeah,
I
awesome.
would totally encourage people to check out Dr. Allison Seebecker over at SIBOinfo.com. She's proven that these bacteria can live on fats, they can live on proteins, they can live on the mucus that we generate. So this idea of starving them out is just, it's not a reality based on the new science.
Mm. Well, his name is Steve Wright. You can find him at scdlifestyle.com. As a physician myself, I highly recommend everyone go and download Steve's free quick start guide. I use it with my patients. I recommend it to all my patients. So everyone go out there and get that right away. Steve, is there any other ways our listeners and viewers can find out more about what you do?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at starting the SCD or GAPS or something like that, or you're having a lot of that stuff, I think the quick start guide is great. If you're someone who's beyond that at this point and you've already tried these types of diets, but you're looking for the next level of information, we recently created a new site called solvingleakygut.com. And on it, you can go there and you can take a free quiz, sort of taking your risk factors into account to see what your chances of having a leaky gut are. And at the end of the quiz, you'll answer a question about what's your number one complaint right now. Is it digestive related? Is it hormones? Is it energy, skin, that type of thing? And when you take the quiz, you only get the results for free, but you also get a 60-minute interview on whatever your top health complaint is. So I would say that what we tried to do is kind of create two different sites. One site for the people who are sort of just getting started with this, more of the beginner stuff for free, and then Solving Leaky Gut is more for the advanced people who are on the train of autoimmunity and have had gut issues for a long time.
Thanks so much, Steve. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, we'll have you back very soon.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.